When Brent's wells were drilled, a mix of lubricants was used in the drilling process, some of which were oil-based. These and the shards of rock that came out of the wells were discharged into the sea.
So around the old platforms in the North Sea, you have these things called cuttings piles, which are essentially little bits of rock and sand, but in there are some smaller quantities of oil-based mud.
The drill cuttings comprise of around 2% hydrocarbons, so very low hydrocarbon content.
The practice of discharging drill cuttings ceased in the 1990s. But for existing piles, the regulator requires operators to measure the level of oil diffusing from them. If it's below a certain threshold, they recognise that leaving the piles undisturbed is the best option.
So in the case of Brent, we've got cuttings piles next to the 4 platforms, and of course in the case of the concrete platforms, there are cuttings piles on tops of the cell tops.
Shell has worked with independent experts to assess Brent's cuttings piles.
We have done some long-term fate modelling to better understand what happens to those cuttings, and we have demonstrated that the hydrocarbon content from those original drill cuttings back in the 70s will slowly degrade and recover.
There's quite a large volume of drill cuttings there. Our specialists looked at them, they've considered the environmental impacts, and what was found was that at Brent Alpha and Brent Delta, they were within OSPAR limits. Brent Charlie, they were fine at the seabed, but the cell tops exceed one of the OSPAR criteria in terms of the oil load released.
The one pile that we have that is slightly above the threshold is on Brent Charlie, where there's a cuttings pile on top of the cells, so it comes up about 9 metres above the cells. That one has a slightly higher leach rate of oil from it because it's more exposed and prone.
Shell used a comparative assessment process to assess the pros and cons of managing this cuttings pile.
If you are to remove them, it is very much using almost like a giant vacuum cleaner to suck them up onto a vessel and then bringing them on shore. So it is a big operation, and there is this risk of putting oil into the water column whilst you do it. That's very hard to prevent.
Though they exceed the threshold, removing them could worsen their environmental impact.
If you disturb them, the disturbance itself will create pollution and release the oil.
Shell recommends leaving all the drill cuttings undisturbed, but continuing to monitor any impact they have on the environment. This is an option the UK regulator has approved before.
There is a requirement to conduct a monitoring operation to understand any impact of leaving the drill cuttings in place and understand that they are degrading in line with our expectations.
Northwest Hutton, which is a BP platform, they've just recently revisited their cuttings pile and indeed see the cuttings piles are naturally degrading and their environment is recovering. And in fact, it's happening a bit quicker than anticipated. So all points to leaving in place and allowing natural degradation is the best way forward.